if you're down, I want to talk about mental health too, because that I'm like I'm trying to be a psychologist as well. Like it's kind of my field.
Yeah, we can touch on it.
Yeah.
I have a very kind of straightforward point of view with it because I've never had that perspective where I've had to deal with it in a way. Like my own kind of personal mental health. Like I've always kind of been in a healthy space. Like I've never been on the other side of it, so I don't have that point of view. But we can definitely touch.
You've never been, huh?
No.
You don't think so?
Really
Like
fortunate.
you can confidently say that you've never been.
I've never been in a place where I have been down on myself, which I think's a product of my upbringing. Like my parents and my environment has always been like very, very safe and encouraging and stuff. So, yeah, very fortunate. Because ultimately, like from my perspective, I think environment's a huge play on that. Like
Right.
In terms of influencing how your brain thinks, the different neuroreceptors and stuff that get activated.
And so you would disagree that, like, you know, people, because there are a lot of people that do have great upbringings and are in a pretty decent environment, but still go through depression, anxiety, like a lot.
And that's the genetic piece. Like there's that age-old debate about like nature and nurture. I'm a firm believer that obviously like nurture is still a contributing factor, huge, but the nurture piece, I'd say it's like 60-40. It's like you could still be in that amazing upbringing, but yeah, you could still have something genetically that alters your brain chemistry in a way.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
It's an ongoing,
something out of your control.
Yeah. I like to think it's under my control, but I don't know, just sometimes it really does feel like, well, I'm just talking personally, I can't speak on anyone else, but I just feel like sometimes it is hard for me to control some of my emotions. And so you've never been in a state of like a little bit of depression or anxiety or...
No, probably the worst I can think about is like I've had a couple of concussions just from basketball. And in those periods when it's like you can't really do a whole lot. But mine always seems to immediately go to not being in that moment, but what can I do to change it? Which I think it is something that maybe it's just I've developed over time, but something that's just been ingrained from the start. So it's like I had those concussions, but I'd be like, okay, what can I do to like make my brain feel better right now? And I got really into meditation. I think the meditating stuff really put me in this moment of presence and made me realize how grateful I am for the things I do have in that moment too.
So you're really...
a huge piece. Gratitude.
Right. So you're really solution driven, and does that come from...
Pragmatic for sure.
Pragmatic, yeah. And does that come from your parents? Because the way they brought you up, like, hey, Brian, like if things are going a certain way, you can always control the outcome in different ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if I think back to just like throughout elementary school, early high school days when it's like something wasn't going my way, but then I'd look to my parents for guidance and they'd always just be like, I'm trying to think, like some of it, like they'd always have a lot of mantras that they'd like share with me, right? And I think to like the things my dad would say is one that my mom would always say is things will always pass. Like nothing's ever permanent.
That's, yeah.
And that's something that I heard from her a lot. And it got to the point where it was just ingrained. So it's like something would happen and it's like, okay, this is just a moment in time.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to define me, right?
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
Yeah. That's a pretty main mantra in the therapeutic field as well with therapy and counseling. That's one thing and so that was basically ingrained in you since a young kid, and that upbringing, that just hearing that constantly and being a part of that has just basically prepared you for anything. It's just it's I guess interesting to me that you're pretty confident in saying that you've never dealt with that mental health. Do you think you ever will?
I think at this, like, I don't want to say for sure, but with that confidence and gratitude, I want to say that it will never happen to me, which I'm proud to say and very grateful to say in a way too. just because another piece I wanted to touch on is, like, growing up, my parents exposed me to a lot of different perspectives as well. One thing I remember, and I'm a firm believer in this too, is like they watched a lot of news like in the living room, and I was just like in their presence, so I'd be watching the news with them a lot, right? And you see these things going on around the world constantly as a young kid when you're in those development stages and your brain's still taking in all that information, and you see how everybody else lives in the world compared to how lucky we have it here. It really gives you all these different perspectives of being how grateful it is to be in Vancouver, for instance, right? So whenever stuff doesn't go my way and such, I always think about the people that maybe potentially don't have it as well as I do in that moment. And it puts you in this perspective of being like, hey, it's not so bad, you know? And that's sparked from like watching the news, being in the presence of all these different media outlets,
right?
And stuff.
So those things really had an impact on you, because I don't know, a lot of times when I was a kid, my mom would say the same things to me, but it would actually piss me off even more because I don't think she understood what I was really going through. And I guess, yeah, you don't have that genetic disposition of, and you're not prone to anxiety and depression, because a lot of people, I think, that try to go down on a route of, you know, having that gratitude of, you know, where we live and all the opportunities we have and how safe we are and how a lot of places people don't have that. I don't think it does much for them, because it's almost like, yeah, okay, I get it. I get that, you know, I am very privileged and I am in this position, but at the end of the day, I still do feel depressed even when I wake up in the morning, and there is no reason for me to be depressed or anxious, right? Because that's crazy. So you've never like literally just like sat down, started watching TV, and you just start feeling this presence of anxiety, like, holy fuck, what the hell is going on?
Never. No.
Wow, man.
I have experienced moments where there was a couple years ago, I really got into eating like energy gummies that were filled with caffeine, and that got my heart beating a bit, but that was probably the only time I felt like a little bit of anxiety. And a big piece that I think helps too is playing sports. Like sports, you deal with anxiety all the time. And that kind of, if you do that from a young age and you build it up to high school, college level, like you're dealing with anxiety every single day, obviously in a different form, but it can translate to many different aspects of life. For instance, like now, if I go into the working world later in my life and something's not going my way, because I was on the basketball court and I was getting bullied by all these guys that were a lot older than me, it's kind of the same mechanism in the head, but just in a different scenario. I know how to deal with it in a way.
A lot of parallels between basketball and just everyday life and the workforce and everything. Yeah.
A lot of lessons. Yeah.
A lot of lessons. So with ball, you got into it at what age?
Super young. So I was remember back in the day, the Steve Nash leagues and such?
Yes, dude.
Do those still go on?
No, man. Steve Nash doesn't go on. That was my first ever basketball experience too. Yeah.
I love that stuff. It was like the white and red reversibles. And like everybody had them. They were at the randomest schools. And I remember I was doing it it was in like grade 1, grade 2. I was doing it with a bunch of my friends. My dad was coaching it along with another kid's dad. And, but basketball wasn't my main sport until I want to say grade 11. Like I was full on baseball. Like I wanted to go to the MLB, and I loved like Albert Pujols, Ryan Holiday. Like I had these guys like up on my wall, and I was like, I'm going to the MLB. I'm going to be like the next,
what are you, pitcher?
Big thing. I love shortstop. I obviously pitched at the time when I was younger, but as soon as I got to high school, I was like shortstop, outfield.
Okay.
And I had some cool opportunities to be on like provincial teams and travel down to Arizona and get scouted and stuff. And then it's funny how, again, it's just environment. Like as soon as I get on a team where it's like I'm not playing, I'm not enjoying the coach, it really set me off of baseball. Like it wasn't my passion anymore. And around that time, I had the coach that was at Semiamu for basketball, like he was such a good mentor for me, and made me really fall in love with basketball at the time. And obviously I had this drive for sports, and I knew I wanted to do something like post-secondary. So then I just completely committed to basketball in like grade 11, grade 12. And
but you were still playing basketball on the side though. It wasn't like you just started at.
So like, here's a great point is I committed to baseball throughout high school because every single summer I'd try out for the provincial team, like the basketball BC provincial team, and I wouldn't make it. And then as soon as I didn't make it, I would go play baseball in the summer because that was the season to play baseball. So like grade 8, I remember trying out for the provincial team for basketball. Didn't make it, went and played baseball. Grade 9, same thing. Grade 10. Grade 11, I probably had a really good chance of making it. I hurt my back in tryouts, and then I didn't make it. And then at that point, I wasn't playing baseball anymore. It was grade 11. I've never played club basketball before at this point. So I hopped on a club basketball team in that summer. It was Van City. I just happened to hop on a Van
That's
City.
North Van, dude.
I know.
Yeah.
We were at the Strathcona, like East Van club team.
Yeah.
And I got some good friends from that team and some cool experiences. But after that summer, I just like, it was a big change for me because instead of committing everything to baseball, now everything was in one bucket. And everything just started going up from there. So like I had a really good summer with Van City, went down to Vegas, did all those trips.
Nice. Jamie was the coach, right?
Jamie was around, but it was some other coach at the time. I don't think he's with them anymore.
Right, yeah. Do you regret, I guess not a regret, do you have some, do you have regrets about baseball? Do you wish you never switched from baseball to basketball? Do you wish that you didn't lose your passion for baseball? Or was it going to be inevitable that you were just going to go to basketball at some point?
I wouldn't call it regrets. Like I think everything obviously happens for a reason. Like the reason I didn't play baseball in the end is because there was ultimately something better for me down the line. But it would have been cool to continue with baseball for sure. Like I imagine, like obviously I I hit this growth spurt in university. So like in grade 12, I was still only 6'3", and now I'm about 6'7", 6'8".
Damn. Okay.
But
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
If I was like 6'8" pitcher, like I think that would be pretty effective in baseball.
Yeah.
Right? So definitely something I think about here and there. And then, you know, what's funny is I'm at my basketball game yesterday, and these guys on the other team come up to me after the game. They're from Seattle, and they were like, "You should play football." And I'm like, I've never played football before. And they're like, "You should go to the like NFL combine and like go try out. Like with your build alone, like you could probably like get something."
Dude, 100%. I didn't even think of that, but yeah.
Because like just athleticism alone, I feel like they could potentially like obviously look at me like I don't have a football background, but I think they take guys just off of athleticism alone.
Right. Yeah.
Size, right.
Yeah. Would you would agree that you're blessed athletically?
Yeah. A very fortunate man. Like both my parents are only 5'9", 5'8", and they obviously did a great job in terms of the nutrition and stuff and raising me, making sure I got enough sleep, but they maximized all the potential I would have done in terms of my growth. Right. I was projected to be like 6'1", like planning to be a point guard the rest of my life. I play like power forward center.
Right.
And like I have a brother, he plays D1 hockey, he's like 6'7". I have a sister that plays D1 basketball, she's 6'3".
Jesus.
Yeah, we got very lucky.
Right.
And there's no one else in our family. Like we have one cousin that's 6'4", but the rest of us, like we outgrew everyone in our extended family.
Really? Right. Well, I guess for your mom, she's actually pretty tall for being 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's obviously a little bit higher than average. But yeah, a lot of times from my understanding is that you get more of the height from your mom's side anyways.
Okay.
So I think that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So you were a late bloomer. I didn't know that. Basically, I mean, would you agree that you were a late bloomer in basketball?
100%.
Yeah.
Like my first 3 years of university basketball, I wasn't a competitive player. Like I was recruited as a point guard at UBC.
No way. Really?
So like I played point guard in high school. All through high school, I was about 6'3", 6'4" when I got recruited to UBC. And then I didn't play my first 3 years because I was slow. I could shoot a little bit, but I couldn't dribble at the same speed that university basketball's played at. And I got into this area where I was like, I don't know my role on this team. I don't know how I'm going to contribute and help the team because I'm not at that level yet, right? And I found the weight room and I got a lot bigger, and then I hit this growth spurt where I grew an extra 4 inches. And I remember coming back in my 3rd year, and that's when I started playing with like Jane Cohey, Manroop, and all those successful guys. And they really needed like a power forward that just rebounds and gets the ball back out to Jaden Manroop, right? And we went to nationals that year, and my role that entire year was to just get 10 rebounds a game and pass the ball to them and set screens. And because I found that role, it then projected me into different roles on the team that now I'm at the point where I'm obviously doing really well.
Right. So. It's cool you say that about roles, man, because a lot of kids, especially younger kids in high school and just starting university, they don't really know their role, and they don't really understand the concept of being part of a team and knowing your role. Because like you just said, you knew Jaden and Manroop were going to take most of the shots. They were going to have the ball in their hands most of the time. Yeah. And you, not being, a rotation player the first couple of years, first 2-3 years, you were thinking to yourself, okay, what can I do to be on the floor? Clearly, I'm not going to be shooting as much. Clearly, I'm not going to be handling the ball as much. What can I do? 10 rebounds. That was the goal. And what's... I guess that's part of your upbringing too. I'm sure like your mom and dad were like, okay, like Brian, you're not, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but Brian, you're not playing enough, or you're not playing as much as you want. What can you do to be on the court, and what can you control?
Totally. Well, I bring it back to like those experiences of not making teams. And you think about the two most important aspects of like being a successful athlete, in my opinion, is you got to have discipline and you got to have patience. And obviously a really good work ethic, so maybe 3. But if you can work really hard and understand that it's not going to be this instant gratification right away, like you obviously got to put in the time and understand that there's going to be guys better than you. A great perspective that I had when I went into UBC is that, and a lot of guys expect to be playing 40 minutes right away. When I went to UBC, I'm like, I'm a grade 8 on a grade 12 team right now. Like there's guys on this team that have been here 5 years already and they've put in the work. Like I have to understand that and be patient and understand that my time will come as long as I put in the work and stay disciplined. And that's the challenge that I've understood, like being with UBC. I've been there this is my 7th year there now. Right. And every single year you see the same stuff, is that guys always want the best for themselves, which is like a given. Like you obviously want to advocate for yourself and like be that guy, but some people have a hard time understanding the patience and understanding the role aspect. And that's the big thing that I think crumbles teams a lot, is that the most successful teams I've been on so far with UBC is that every single guy understands and perfects their role. Right.
It's the role, knows it's a bigger part of the success of the team. One thing I do remember when I was playing at Cap, and I do remember because I played there for 2 years, and I remember the second year I was there, because I actually played there when I was 22, so I was a little bit older, and there was guys that were just coming out of high school. As an older guy, I always told myself, man, there's no way a fucking high school kid is coming to take my spot. There's absolutely no, I don't care how good he was in high school, how what his rank was, whatever, I don't give a shit. And like, that's one of the things, like, you were very self-aware, knowing that you were going to UBC and you were a grade 8 guy in a grade 12 team, and these guys are basically men at this point. Like they're thinking about life after basketball at this pretty soon, and you understood that, and you said, okay, well, I got to be patient. Do you think you could have, and I know you're still at UBC, I don't know if this is controversial, but do you think you could have gone somewhere else and played a bigger role right away? And do you care if you didn't do that?
For sure. And I'll touch on that a bit, but I had a couple other offers at the time in grade 12, but they were lower schools. Like they were the UBCO, the TRU, great schools still, but obviously UBC is considered higher in terms of basketball competition
and academics, right?
And academics, and that's obviously a huge important. But so I was planning on going to one of those schools, because I didn't have this offer at UBC. And I would have had a big role in my first year, and it would have been a completely different experience. But I remember it was like a Tuesday in like January, like in my grade 12 year, my high school coach was like, "Oh, Brian, there's a scrimmage at UBC. There's some recruits from Ontario, some grade 12 recruits that UBC is looking at, and they need them to play against other high school guys to see like what their level is at."
Right.
It was like, "Do you want to go?" And it was at the SRC, like at the rec center at UBC. So me and a couple of guys on my team from Semiahmoo, we went and played in this scrimmage, and I played probably the best basketball I've ever played. Like I was hitting shots. There was a couple of UBC guys there that were currently on the team, and I was playing really well against them. And the coaches were there, the assistant coaches of UBC at the time. And they like pulled me over after, and they were like, we don't know who you are. We've never seen you before, but we want you.
Mm-hmm.
And just after that experience, I didn't get offered, like in my first year at UBC, I redshirted. Like that's all they could offer me. Like I could have went to UBCO, I could have went to TRU, played a ton, but I really wanted to go to UBC because of the academics, first of all, but to play against guys that are 10 times better than me that could push me like that, even if I don't even have to play for the first full year, I think was something really powerful, right?
Small fish in a big pond rather than a big fish in a small pond.
Totally.
Right.
And it just goes back to that aspect of I'm a grade 8 playing against grade 12s. The only way you're really going to get better, and I tell like with my club kids all the time, I say the best way you can get better is you play against guys that are way better than you, play against people that are older than you. And because I had that mindset ingrained in me, I was like, I need to go to UBC and get my butt kicked. And that's what happened for the first 3-4 years until I kind of figured things out and found my groove. Right.
And now at this point, fast forward 4, 5, 6 years, you're a main guy averaging, and I don't know how I know this, but you averaged 16 and 10 last year.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
My friend told me.
Like that.
That's why I'm having you on the pod. He's like, dude, you averaged like 16 and 10 last year. I'm like, oh shit, okay.
I think a double. I had a couple good games last year where I did like my big thing is I get a lot of offensive rebounds. Like I'll put the ball up, like it doesn't go in, I grab that again and I put it up. So that's how I get a lot of
the second jump right away. Nice.
So and I think that stemmed from 3 years ago when I was just a rebounder. I wasn't focused about the actual scoring piece, but because I have that aspect of my game, I was able to build off of it. And now I can get a bunch of rebounds and score. So
nice. So one thing I also wanted to talk about, because it's it's life after basketball, and I'm in that now. I'm in that phase, and you're still in it. You're most likely you are going to play pro after your collegiate career, and I think are you totally engulfed in basketball right now, where you don't even think about life after basketball, or are you starting to think about, okay, well, what are some other things that I'm into? Like you're doing your master's in kinesiology, so there's that occupies your mind a lot, right?
Yeah,
that's
one
of
a
your
big aspect of currently.
Yeah.
I like when you talk about just like basketball and golfing, everything right now, I'd agree with that though, just because like I like the idea of trying to stay in the present moment as much as possible. Obviously, you have to have a plan for the future, and everything obviously is not permanent, so you got to make sure that you have these plans for if stuff doesn't work out. Like for instance, if I get injured, knock on wood, if I get injured like within the next day, like I have to transition into something different, whereas like basketball's not a part of my life now, but I can use all the values and stuff that I've built from basketball and translate that into something else, the discipline and motivation. But yeah, my plan's to go play professional. Because I'm finishing a master's, I obviously have that background of understanding the body, and it's either I'm really passionate about strength and conditioning. Like I've found a cool niche with training young athletes with strength and conditioning, and just finding a way to make it kind of cool and acceptable. Because that's one thing I think a lot of youth athletes miss, is the trying to make yourself more of a robust athlete rather than I'm just really good at basketball. Like there's a lot of missing qualities that a lot of youth athletes, and at least from my perspective, they're lacking in terms of overall athleticism that can just easily be changed if you just have a little bit of understanding of how your body works.
Right.
So either I finish professional, I come back and I start a business like that, or I really, because I've been in academia for a while now and I'm starting to do a lot of research on like athlete injuries and stuff within my master's, I low-key want to do a PhD. I feel like I've already finished the master. I'm like, why not just keep running with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because one thing that I always want to be, and I'm a big fan of podcasts, and a lot of the podcasts I listen to are preach this a lot, is just being a lifelong learner. And as soon as you stop learning, like, you're dead.
Yeah.
So if I can continue progressing and learning more about this world, like I see no reason why not to.
Especially with the human body, I feel like there's so many things that
we have no idea about. Like, the amount of research that's actually out there in terms of the human body is so limited to compared to what the body actually does.
What the body actually is and how much it has. Yeah. One thing I wanted to, what you said about the youth not really optimizing their athleticism and not really basically giving a shit about it. Do you think it's almost they're too lazy to give a shit? Because one thing I remember, like, I regret not caring enough about my body and like the different functional things and athleticism that I could have maximized, and it would have ultimately helped me on the court. Do you think a lot of kids just basically just, you know, they're either athletic or not and they just kind of accept it? I mean, they do things here and there. They go to the gym and do squats and, you know, do box jumps and stuff like that, but there's only so much they do, and then that's it.
I hear you. From my perspective, I think it's more these youth athletes don't have the knowledge to understand how critical these things are. Like the strength and conditioning. Sorry
to interrupt, but like one thing I remember, that is one thing. I had a few. Do you know Shondell Ben Saltis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked with him when I was in high school, and a lot of the times when we would work out, in the back of my mind, I would say to myself, like, "Damn, man, is this really gonna matter? Like, do I really?" Yeah, because I'm already not that athletic. I was never the fastest guy. I was really deceptive, and like I used my body in good ways, but I was never the quickest, never jumped highest. So I was kind of like, it was kind of, I was at a point where I was just discouraged and just even going to the training session, because I'm like, what am I getting out of this? I'm already so not athletic. I'm not dunking on anyone. I'm not blowing by anyone. So like that was kind of my mindset, and I feel like a lot of kids maybe do have that, and they just don't even bother trying to.
I totally agree, and I think the big piece to that is that, at least from my experience with all this strength and conditioning stuff, is that every athlete's different, and every athlete can benefit from a different aspect of strength and conditioning. So it's like this generalization of, oh, you should go do squats, oh, you should go do agility ladders. Like, obviously that could help you from a very generalized aspect, but because every athlete functions differently, their anthropometrics are all different, the way they move, their pelvis orientation, like, there's so many variables that go into it. But as soon as you understand like how an athlete works, you can then give them the tools to make them a better athlete. And as soon as they see a little bit of improvement, then you get the buy-in, right? But you're talking about, you had this doubt because you potentially didn't see the actual translation of the stuff when you were doing that training, and potentially it was because you weren't doing the proper training or the correct training for your particular body. Yeah.
I don't want to shit on Sean, because I love Sean. He's like, what am I?
Too.
I love him, but no, it definitely helped. I just feel like I had this expectation that I wanted to be LeBron James, and there's literally no way I could be that. I guess I was just delusional, and that just held me back. And I think that maybe that's another thing though too, because a lot of kids look at these guys on YouTube and these guys on Instagram just doing like windmilling everything and doing E-Space, right? And they're measuring themselves to that, and it's like, the fact of the matter is, a lot of them won't be able to do that.
No, but acknowledging that, and I think a lot of athletes do acknowledge it, but then being that pragmatic kind of approach and being like, well, what can I control? Yeah. You think about Steph Curry, he's like, and Trae Young, like, these guys have been incredible for basketball because they've shown that you don't need to be that 6'8", 6'10" athletic player to play in the NBA. Like, you can go deadlift 400 pounds like what Steph Curry does and then shoot threes and be this super quick defender and still be super effective, right? So I think it's just about understanding your body and what you can actually do with it that I'm still trying to figure out in terms of, because one thing that's I think the most important, at least from like my work at UBC and my studies, is how to translate like the really complicated like physiology and the biomechanics stuff into some lay knowledge that kids will resonate with. So understanding that, for instance, there's two types of athletes. I like to categorize people. There's the muscle-driven athletes and then the tendon-elastic-driven athletes. And you can, like, just from me looking at an athlete, I can tell whether they're muscle or elastic-driven. The elastic ones is like they can jump really high off one foot. They don't need a lot of knee bend in order to like spring from like step to step. Where a muscle-driven athlete, like they have to get into really deep knee angles in order to like jump. They need to push off a lot more into like obviously the heavier angles. And from my perspective, like I'm a very muscle driven athlete, and it's because I've worked on building my muscles and the contraction aspect of it. But there's guys on my team like Fareed, where he's just solely elastic, and he's got like a 45-inch vertical.
Christ.
And it's like those are two completely different athletes on different ends of the spectrum, but we're still like going towards the same goal. Like we can both dunk really well. Right. He obviously can dunk a lot better than I can, but we just the way we approach the sport is in a different like biomechanical lens.
And one's not really necessarily better than the other. It's just you got to accept that you're this way and Fareed is the other way.
Yeah, and you just use your strengths. Like obviously, because I'm a muscle-driven athlete, like there's a lot of things I can't do. Like I can't, we talked about it earlier, like me getting the offensive rebound and going up. Like I need a little bit more like knee bend to get back up into those jumps, where Fareed could like put it off the glass and just as soon as he touches the ground, he'll spring back up and dunk.
Legs like basically straight and go back up. Yeah.
So it's just understanding your body, and that just comes with time as well. Like I've gotten to the point where it's like I know exactly what my body needs in order to perform at a certain level, but it took me 7 years at university to figure that out. Right.
So would you be able to like get any, like if once you start training clients and youth and whatever, do you think you could get any person, any player with any body type and get them to be pretty effective on the court? Because for me, like I have the body type of a fucking wrestler. Like I'm like a Persian guy that, you know, should have fucking been wrestling or doing some sort of like contact sport where like a fucking center in football. Like I did not have a basketball body by any means, and I worked on it to get it to a certain point where it's somewhat acceptable, but I was never the optimal body type for basketball. And like for me, like if I was to come to you and be like, hey Brian, like I really love basketball, I really want to get better at it, like would you be able to help me even though my body looks like a fucking, you know, 4-time gold medalist in the Olympics in wrestling, you know what I mean?
Yeah Like obviously I can't make any promises, because as soon as you make promises, then there's unreal expectations that are associated with that. But I'd like to think that I could help for sure. And you touched on this idea about how like your body's perfect for wrestling. That's one thing I've always believed in, is that because everyone's body is different, there's like this, I don't know if it's a hot take, but there's got to be a sport out there that everybody's body can like be the maximal potential with, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
but then there's guys like you that could be an absolute specimen in like 4 different sports.
And that's where it's like I was just blessed and lucky to have these genetics, right? But I think everybody has a body type where they could really excel in one sport, but the one thing that challenges that is their passion. So it's like obviously like you could have done really well in wrestling, like you said, but because your passion was basketball, your passion is going to triumph over what your actual like true calling could be. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's a tough It's a tough thing, man, because there's like this push and pull where it's like, God damn it, man. Like I really like I did swimming too, and I was actually pretty good at swimming, but I also don't have a swimming body because I'm not 6'3", skinny build. I'm always a thicker guy.
Yeah.
Like you'll see it in the NBA, man. Like you'll see guys like, I don't know, Chet Holmgren or like Terrence Ferguson, just elastic dudes that could just jump out of the fucking building. But then you have Kyle Lowry, that's a fucking slug.
And there's a lot of guards like that in the league though now. Like the kind of stockier, really strong based guards, like those are muscle driven athletes in a way. And they're able to be so successful because like NBA does a lot of switching actions where like a guard needs to switch onto a big, and if you're skinny and small, like you're not gonna do well in those switching positions. But a guy like Kyle Lowry or Freddie VanVleet, like they're able to still hold their ground because they have that weight behind them.
Right.
So, and then on the offensive side, it really helps you as well because there's a big difference between being, and you know this, being strong and then being basketball strong. Like you can obviously tell like those NBA players that are stocky, like obviously they're strong, but their basketball strength, like their core ability and their ability to use their body to muscle guys out of the way is a different level.
And know how to bounce off guys to be able to get enough space to, you know, do a little floater or whatever. Yeah.
That's one thing I learned from one of my teammates, like James Woods. He's obviously not the biggest guy, but the way he's able to use his body to create space is like nothing I've seen before. Like that's what makes him an all-star. Like that trick alone, like obviously he's a great shooter, but when he gets into the paint, like his ability to like hit someone first, make the first contact, because you know with basketball, like on the offense you want to make contact, with defense you don't want to have contact. Like you want to make sure you have space so then you can react quicker. But he's able to initiate that contact, and then after that it's easy for him.
One thing, and the fact that you brought up James Wood, it reminded me of something. The notion that Steph Curry isn't athletic and he's just another guy, I've always thought that was such bullshit, man. Because when I saw him play in person, like he's big. Like Steph Curry's a big guy. Like he's not by any means a small guy. Like he was at the earlier on in his career when he was skinnier. But when I saw him play a few years back when KD was on the team, like dude, he's like jacked and he's big. He's like 6'3". So like that notion about Steph Curry, about him being small and unathletic, is such fucking horse crap. I hate it. I hate that.
Well, it's relative though. Like compared to other NBA players, he is really small, but he is an exceptional athlete though. Still, like you watch all these documentaries about him training in the off season. He's deadlifting 450s. He's squatting a bunch. He's doing all these different movements that you wouldn't expect him to do, but he has that gift. But that's, I think anything with like those lifting capabilities, that's discipline in a way too. Like obviously he's got exceptional discipline that's got him to where he is,
Of course.
but you can really build a lot of those qualities just through that constant work ethic.
And you would say that there's a exercise for each person, each player, that would help them optimize their potential. Like each person's different, therefore each person has a different exercise that would help them. Like one for me, maybe like squats would help me, but for another player, deadlifts would be more effective. Is that how it works? Really?
Like I mean, it's tough to ultimately say that, but like in a very broad generalization, yeah, I'd agree with that, because there's some athletes that, or just like individuals in general, that respond really well to certain exercises, and then others that won't at all, because there's so many variables to the human body. It's ridiculous. But like even like there's another aspect, like we talked about the strength athlete, the elastic athlete, then there's also like anterior dominant athletes and posterior dominant athletes. And it's this idea that there's a lot of athletes that use the backside of their body a lot to produce force and project out, when there's a lot of other athletes that use like their quads and such. And I'm someone that's like very quad biased in terms of my projections. So for instance, if I did deadlifts, that wouldn't be as effective as if I did squats.
Squats, right. Okay.
And that's something that you can obviously train over time. Like you can adapt. Like it's always a spectrum with everything in life, and like this is a perfect spectrum. Like there's the posterior athlete, the anterior athlete. You can move yourself along that spectrum, but you always start in one aspect. right? So it's like I'm over on the anterior side. But if I start training a lot of posterior dominant movements, like I can move that needle and I can get to the point where I'm over here. But because of again, the way my body works, there's one optimal area, and it's just about finding that optimal area.
So with that, you're posterior, right? You're more posterior.
I'm more anterior.
Anterior.
Like front of the body.
Anterior is front. Okay. So do you think, is it better to focus on your anterior and maximize that and not even focus on your posterior? Or is it you try to get your posterior to catch up to your anterior?
That's another variable, right? Because you don't want to be so far over on one side of the spectrum that now there's all these compensations that happen and you're so biased to the point where injuries and stuff arise, right? So it's just about finding the sweet spot. And it's like the sweet spot's never going to be in the middle. It's always going to be biased to one side. But obviously I still have to do a lot of posterior stuff in order to make sure that there's that compensation that still goes on.
Right. So if you just do straight squats for like a million different squats and don't do anything for your posterior, it leads to injury. The compensation leads to injury.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to think, so I've had a good amount of injuries over the years, and currently I'm dealing like with some hip injuries, just some stuff that's nagging, like some FAI, which is like hip impingement. And I think a lot of it stems from I trained so much in terms of getting my legs really strong and building a lot of mass that I neglected a lot of the intrinsic like small muscles in the hip that support and stabilize a lot of the movements that I do. And because those are really behind compared to this, now I have to do a lot of like catching up.
Right.
And that's what created the compensation that now this is injured and I got to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. And you're lucky because you're doing your master's in this, so you can really like dissect what you're going through and be like, okay, this is what's, because a lot of people don't know what's going on, right?
That's one thing, like I have not a hard time understanding, but like I think it would be really cool if athletes start to really put an emphasis on understanding how their body works. I imagine like all the Olympians and all the really successful athletes, this is what they do every single day, is like they research and have a clear understanding of exactly how their body works, the nutrition, all this stuff. Because if you're going into like a job blindly and you don't have all this background information about how the job's going to work and stuff, like you're obviously not going to do good at your job. Same thing with sports, like your body's your vessel in terms of performance. If you don't have all this background information about how your body's going to perform and how it works, are you really going to optimize like your performance?
Right.
So
I think it's just like there's a factor of it just being a little bit boring, like kind of like,
I totally agree.
You know, like young athletes, especially because they want that instant gratification of like, I want to dunk tomorrow. I want to do this. Why am I feeling this way? They don't want to put in the extra work of understanding the body, and it's a little bit complicated maybe, and they're too lazy to really do all the extra stuff. But I think that's a huge part of it.
I totally agree. And I think it stems from the instant gratification and not seeing that it actually translates to something. My first thought that came to my head, I was listening to it on the ride here, is Huberman Lab podcast.
Yep.
He does an excellent job of creating protocols to be like, hey, if you do this, this is going to happen, or something like this is going to happen. And I think that's something that could be really effective in the athlete space. Like obviously a lot of his stuff translates to athlete space. But if we were able to be like, hey, if you did this exercise for this amount of time, like you would obviously see some results. And I think that's what's going to create a lot of that intrinsic motivation for a lot of youth athletes. But it's just about finding the dialect and the actual like mantras and language that can make it resonate with kids.
Right. Yeah.
So
I guess also it's the fact that like most kids, like if you were to ask them like, what do you want to do on the basketball court? First thing they're going to say, I want to dunk. Right. And the fact of the matter is like, that's a really long process, especially if you don't have that genetic ability to start off with, and you're not that tall and you don't have long limbs. Like there's a long process, but like no player ever I don't know, no player has ever said like, oh, I want to be able to cut a guy off if they, you know, make a move, and
Totally.
you know what I mean? And that would be way easier for you to teach them how to be able to, you know, be able to move laterally and cut a guy off rather than, you know, being able to fucking windmill right away, right?
I think if we were able to change the narrative of being like, rather than wanting the dunk will get you a scholarship, but cutting a guy off will get you a scholarship, then it will change that a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I'm really trying to promote, like within like the club basketball team that I'm working with, or the Kaizen basketball, is like we want to try and change a lot of the dialect that goes on, where it's like, it's not about, like everyone talks about this, it's not about the flashy stuff, and it's so cliche to talk about that, but if we can find the language to be like, hey, this is what's really important, and because we have all these college coaches that are like been at that level and say like, no, it doesn't matter if you dunk, it's like, if I can play defense really well,
100%.
then I feel like we can make some ground with it.
100%, yeah. No, it's crazy, man. So many kids come up to me, they're like, dude, I want to be able to dunk. I'm like, dude, you can't even make a right-handed layup.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, not to offend you or anything, but like, you gotta prioritize a few other things before you know, dunking's great because, you know, dunking, you know, shows that you are athletic in some ways for sure, but it's not everything. And yeah, like, I could care less, like as a coach for me, like when we do tryouts and I'm seeing who's good or not, I don't care who's dunking or not. I mean, it is a factor in certain ways where like, okay, like you caught my attention, but it's really like, how can you cut a guy off? Can you run back and really sprint back into like stance or whatever?
One thing I tell a lot of the kids that I train though too is that they can train in the gym and do plyometrics to improve their jump, but that will translate to a lot of other aspects in basketball. Like if you train a lot to jump, like obviously you're doing a lot of vertical projection, but that can translate into horizontal, which is like the defensive slides and the sprints and such like that. So training for jump, obviously like you can get it towards that goal of trying to dunk, but it can translate to a lot of other aspects of the game too, which I think can hit two birds with one stone in a way too.
And do you think like if you went up to a kid or any athlete at any level and said, hey man, do you want to be able to stay in front of everyone defensively? And they say yes. And then you say, if you do these exercises and you stay consistent, you work hard, you will be able to stay in front of everyone. Like, is that like almost what we have to do with most athletes now, especially in basketball? It's not like just to make it cool, like make it cool that, like, hey man, like, you know how you tried to go off the dribble and this guy really stayed in front of you? Hey, if you do this, you will be able to blow by guys and get 6 extra points a game. Like, do you want that? Like, is it almost like you have to like get them to understand, like, if you want to score more points, if you want to get 6 more points in a game, do these exercises to be able to blow by a guy and then get a layup? Like, is that what it just has to come down to? I
like that idea, but I feel like that's never, like, in the real world, it won't happen in that way. Yeah. Just because I feel like for decades, like, people have tried to change the narrative around defense and obviously make it more of an importance and try and make it cool, but it'll never be cool, especially with the NBA and them making it more of an entertainment-based sport where it's like the dunks and the flashy stuff is what people want to see, right? Like, no one wants to really see the defense side of the ball. I think it's really cool. You talked about like giving a kid a plan though. Like, if we can, I was thinking back to when I was in high school. Like, obviously I had these huge aspirations. Like, I remember I would lie down at night and I had a bunch of piece of paper taped to my ceiling, and it would just be like a bunch of different D1 universities, and the one in the middle was Gonzaga. I really wanted to play at Gonzaga, but there was no chance I'm playing at Gonzaga. It was something I'd reach for, but I lost my train of thought. I didn't know ultimately like what it took to get to that level, right? Like I would go and work out every single morning. I would go before school. I'd get on the shoe machine. I'd train at night. I'd do about 2-3 workouts a day. But I thought that was enough to get to the goal I wanted to get to. And no one was telling me otherwise. And I think it was because I didn't have anyone that was at that level telling me what I ultimately needed to do to get there. And I think what's really important is because I'm surrounded by a lot of university coaches that are in this Kaizen basketball club that know what it takes to get to that level. We can now incorporate like these blueprints of being like, hey, this is what I did to get to this level. Obviously, like our genetic gifts are different, but like if you follow this blueprint, it's obviously going to give you the tools that I already have, and then you can build off it with your own tools and your own capabilities, right? And so, for instance, once again, like I was in high school, I didn't have like this blueprint, but now I want to give this blueprint to younger athletes so that now they have something that they can work towards. And because it's completely laid out for them, then they have something that it's not like, oh, well, this day I'm tired. I don't have, I can just chill. It's like, no, it's written down. Like if you want to truly be disciplined and be motivated, like it's there right in front of you in order to reach your goal.
Right. It's an interesting thing though with that, man, because do you think at a certain point there's a fine line between being honest with a kid and really, not really putting them down? Like if a kid comes up to me and tells me he wants to play for Kentucky, right? And he's a 5'6" dude that, is pretty good on his high school team and he really wants to get to D1. Forget about Kentucky, just play D1, right? Like I think there's like, do you think there's a point where there needs to be some sort of honesty and realistic expectation? Like, yeah, man, like, okay, like I'm not gonna put you down and be like, no, like that's not happening, man. I'm not gonna be a dick about it, but it's kind of like,
from my perspective, I don't think there's any reason to shoot anyone's dreams down. Like I was listening to yesterday, Jay Shetty had Arnold Schwarzenegger on his podcast recently, and Arnold was talking about how he never had a plan B. Like he just knew that he wanted to be like Mr. Universe. He wanted to be this famous actor. He wanted to be the governor. And he did all of it because he didn't have this other option and he didn't have people telling him, oh, you should have a plan B. And I think as someone that's a mentor for these young kids, like if someone wants to have this aspiration to play at Kentucky, like if you're shooting for the moon, like you're going to land amongst the stars at some point, as long as you have that work ethic, the discipline and all that such, right?
And not getting discouraged.
But the biggest piece is if you want to go play at Kentucky, then you should go reach out to players at Kentucky. Like go on Instagram and message these guys. Some of them might get back to you and be like, what did you do every single day to get yourself to this level? Obviously those guys, they have these genetic gifts that are different that we've talked about before. But if you can emulate a lot of the things that they did, like there's no reason that you wouldn't have the same capabilities and then adjust it to what your personal capabilities are as well.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree. Never shooting down their dreams, because that's just, as a coach, like I feel like that also comes from a place of insecurity. Like if a kid tells me they want to play, D1 or at UBC and they're still developing, I would never say, oh, that's never going to happen. I would just be like, okay, well, it's going to take a lot of work. Like I'm going to be honest with you. Like
you have to match your goals with your work ethic and the actual work you're putting in. So it's like if a kid came up to me and was like, I want to play at Kentucky, but he's only practicing 3 times a week, then it's like you have to change your habits. I'm a big, we haven't talked about this yet, but like habit building. Have you ever read Atomic Habits? Have you heard of that book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
My favorite book of all time.
Okay.
Like if you can build successful habits, like small habits throughout the day, and they just build on each other, like this idea of getting 1% better. And if those 1% stack and stack and stack, obviously it becomes something significant. So if you can every single day create something that builds that discipline, like I feel like there's no reason to not be successful in the end.
And it's little things that might be boring to some people, right? Like, it doesn't have to be something significant where you do something crazy where it's like, wow, that's a big, it's like little, like the smallest things.
I on the way here, I'm listening to Huberman's new one on willpower, and he's talking about how important it is to like just have that motivation to drive you.
It's just making a routine, right? And just sticking to that routine every day.
Yeah. So with willpower, it's always associated with stuff you don't want to do. But if you can change your mindset to the point of view where it's like, I'm doing this because it's going to make me better in the long run. It sucks in the moment. And that's one thing I really like with, it's just a small thing that I do, but it's a habit I do every day, is the cold shower.
Yeah.
So as soon as I wake up, I go to my bathroom and I put it on the coldest temperature possible. And I go 3, 2, 1, and I dunk my head under. And it's like, it's very, very uncomfortable. But because I'm doing that the very first thing in the day, everything after that becomes a lot easier, because I just put myself through something really uncomfortable at the very start of the day. Now I've basically created that kind of foot in the door for everything else that's going to be uncomfortable during that day.
Right.
You know?
That's a good segue into TikTok, because I was going through your TikTok and I saw the video of the day in the life where you woke up at like 6 a.m. or like 5 a.m. and you did like your stretches, you worked out.
All habits. Yeah.
All habits. It's just, when I watched that video, and this is me, I don't know if anyone else, but like I kind of feel shitty watching that after, because I'm like, Jesus, like I'm such a piece of shit. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I woke up at 8 a.m., you know, went and took a shit for half an hour, went back into bed, fell asleep again, woke up, went and turned on my TV, right? Like, I think, like, it's great you're doing that, right? Like, it's really, it's awesome, and you're really showing what it takes being a university athlete, being at UBC, but, like, I've seen a lot of those videos before.
Yeah.
And do you think, you know, for me, it like puts me in like in a place where I'm like, God damn it, like I'm not doing enough, and it kind of gives me anxiety, and I get all like sad and my feelings, and I feel like, do you think a lot of people would watch that video and be like, damn man, like this guy's killing it and I just don't have that in me, or they feel guilty for not doing that?
I hear you. Ultimately, like, I put those videos out because I want to try and motivate people. Like, I never see it from the perspective of like it's gonna hurt someone when they see it.
Of course.
Make them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something I need to work on with the next couple videos, but maybe just the dialect that I have with it too, that kind of put it in a way where it's like, this is possible for anyone. And going back to like the habits building stuff, like I didn't do all that stuff right away. Like when I was in high school, like obviously I had healthy habits, but I wasn't having a cold shower in the morning. I wasn't stretching every morning. I wasn't waking up at 6 o'clock. It was, I would have one habit and then I would build off it. As soon as I solidified that one, it's called habit stacking. So it's like, as soon as you build one habit, then the idea of, or maybe it's habit coupling, but as soon as you have one habit, you then couple it with something that you want to try and achieve. And because you're already doing something. So for instance, I really wanted to start doing the cold showers this year. And I told myself that as soon as I make my bed, so I wake up, I make my bed. As soon as I make my bed, I go do the cold shower. And because I couple the making the bed, which was already a previous habit that I solidified, with something new that I was trying to solidify, it clicked a lot easier in my head. Like I was able to say, okay, because I did this, now I have to do this.
Because you have one habit on lock, and then
and now that I have the cold shower down, I'm like, okay, what's next? So now I have these 2 habits stacked. Now it's like I have my cold shower. Okay, I go into the living room, I put my oatmeal in the microwave, and I stretch. So it's like boom, 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 and now I got that down. Okay, what's next? So it was never like throughout the entire day. I did this from day one. It was a process that I built over this past 7 years of being at UBC and trying to figure out my.
That's a really good point, because most people probably think you wake up one day and you're like, I'm doing these 4 habits in a row right away. Like that's too much. That's overwhelming. You can't do 100%. All that. Yeah.
And I totally agree. That's probably where it gets it invokes like the anxiety and the overwhelming aspect of it, because you see all these things and you're like, well, how does he do all that? But it was because I built it from like the foundation, and now I've put layers onto it.
Like the first one you probably did was wake up every day at 6 a.m. And that was solely it.
Wake up at 6 a.m. and then I would just go to the gym. But now it's like I have all these things in between that. That obviously improve my performance, improve my well-being. Like there's been a lot of, a good point too, is like there's been a lot of habits that I've tried to implement, but then I realized they're not for me. So it's like, for instance, one summer, for an entire summer, I was like, I'm going to wake up and then I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes, because I listen to a lot of podcasts. A lot of people on podcasts really promote the idea of meditation. But it was just something that I couldn't really get into, and I didn't really resonate with a whole lot, because I feel like I'm a very like calm, patient person. Like meditating for me is kind of like, it didn't really see any benefit to me at the moment, especially after waking up and you're already kind of in this present state. So I tried it for a couple months and I was like, this isn't for me. Let's find something new. But that's the same thing about the individuality. Like obviously no one's going to do the exact same thing I'm doing when you see these videos, but it's like you could find stuff that really resonates with you and build those habits, and then you could ultimately have a day that's you'd feel really happy about, because it's something that's personal to yourself.
Dude, and I'm so thankful that you bring this up, bro, because it's okay if one thing doesn't work for you. Like if cold showers isn't your thing and you really don't see a benefit, it's okay. Like a lot of people, I think, a lot of younger people too, I think, like especially younger people, if they watch that video of you doing day in the life, they're like, I need to do exactly what Brian is doing. I need to wake up 6 a.m., shower, this, that. Like what? There's no issue, with waking up at 8 a.m. and doing a cold shower, or waking up at 8 a.m. not doing a cold shower and just stretching. Like it's okay. You're still just as productive if it's working for you. Like a lot of people, I think, don't understand it, especially with TikTok.
100%. I think a good point to relay off that though is like, if someone sees my video and they're like, I'm going to try that, even trying it for a couple days and then realizing that it's not for you, but at least that you tried it, is like the first step in all that, because it shows that you have that motivation and that discipline to at least better yourself. Because if you see that video and you go, like, I don't feel good about myself, like this is something that I don't ever see myself doing, then you, right off the bat, you don't have that intrinsic motivation to better yourself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Brian, you mentioned on the subject of habits and your schedule, how you wake up early in the morning and you do this training routine. Going back to, you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger because he's doing these interview rounds because he's got this book. There's one thing that really resonated with me, and he was talking about how there's this, and one of his concerns is this whole new generation of young people that are soft. And he said one thing that really, really stuck out for me, which was America wasn't built on people that sleep in, right?
That's just a capitalist mentality.
I just think that's, for me, that really resonates with me. And anyone that wants to succeed and do anything and reach a certain level of success or build something or make something, you don't do it by not putting in the time, by not waking up early, it's a grind, whether it's sports or, doing this podcast, for example, showing up on a regular schedule and not just doing it when you feel like it. you know, and I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah. I'd like to touch on that. Like, we talked about one of the first habits I started doing was waking up really early. And we've had a lot of motivational speakers that have come in and talked with our UBC basketball team this year. And they're all really successful because they talk about this a lot, because they wake up early.
Yeah.
And you think about all the different podcasts and all these really successful people in the world, the majority of them, there's probably some that don't, but they all wake up early, because as soon as you wake up, there's this period of time that obviously there's probably some scientific evidence to support this, but you're most productive in the morning. But if you sleep in, if you stay up really late and you sleep in, like, you're missing a great portion of time where no one else is up, and you have that alone time where you can be really productive. Like, if you're waking up at 11, 12, and then the rest of the world is up and social media is up and all this such,
Right.
then there's a lot more distractions that can stop you from having that productivity that you want to get and want to achieve.
Right.
So,
Like, there's a reason why people say waking up early is productive. Like, it's not just something people are just throwing around. Like, it's work for a lot of people, and people see benefits from it, right? Like, it's just like empirical evidence after one after another, right?
yeah. And I think that could be the first step for a lot of people in terms of if they want to change some aspects of their life and make some different habits, is if you just wake up early. Now, you wake up at 6, and from 6 to 9 o'clock, where usually you'd wake up at 9, you have 3 hours to do something, whether it's something that involves your passion or work or your sport. Like, now you have all this extra time that you could dedicate towards something that you really want to work towards.
And just understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Like, a lot of people just feel like, okay, wake up early. Okay, so what's the point? Like, what is the real meaning and reason behind waking up early? Like you said, you wake up earlier before anyone else. You're more productive during that time. Social media is pretty tame at that point. Taking showers, like, there's a lot of physiological and biological benefits from it, right? It's not just about taking a shower just to take a shower, a cold shower. There's
Yeah.
You know, there's physical.
Well, there's proven evidence. Like, you look back at Huberman again, like, he has protocols to suggest that cold showers invoke a lot of different hormone secretion, stuff that's really beneficial for your body long term.
Right.
So it's like you could do it once, but it's like if you do it for multiple months on end, like, you could see some true benefits from it.
Right. And whether you want to implement it into your routine is your decision. It's not whether you think it really is worth it and it is really impacting you in a good way. That's up to the person.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So one thing you want to talk about is TikTok, man. You're blowing up on that, because Hannah messaged me, because she was the one that got us in contact. She was saying that, oh yeah, his TikTok is blowing up, and I didn't search it up until like 2 days ago, and I was like, holy shit.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just another one of those things that, so I was playing with the Bandits this summer, and I broke my finger about a couple days before season started. I was hoping to be a part of the team, play, all that, but because I mangled my finger, I couldn't play for the whole summer. And I had all this extra time because I was supposed to be doing school, but I took a leave of absence to play basketball, and I was like, what am I going to do with all this free time? And I had some friends in university that always said, like, if you did TikTok, like, you could probably do pretty well with it.
Yeah.
And I kind of always just downplayed it, because I'm like, that's not really me. I don't like putting myself out there. But there was just one night I'm like, I'm gonna do it. Like, why not? Like, there's a lot of opportunities that you pass up on because of other people's expectations of you, but you know in your gut, like, you know you should do it. And it was one of those gut feelings where I'm like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna regret it. So I'm glad that I started doing it. So, but I was like, if I'm doing this, I'm gonna go all in on it, because with everything in life, like, you should never half-ass stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna post every single day. The first couple months I was posting 2 times a day, and I wanted it to be like creative stuff. I wanted it to be like just kind of good energy, nothing that downplays anyone else or creates controversy, but just stuff that people can relate to and basketball specific things. And yeah, like it's been like 4 or 5 months now, and I've posted like every single day. And
Yeah.
I think the big piece is just the thinking of content, which I really enjoy that piece because it keeps your mind really creative. It's like my mind will drift to places where it's like, oh, like I could think of this idea for a TikTok. Oh, I could do this.
Yeah.
And then that creativity translates to a lot of other aspects of my life. Now it's like I'm on the basketball court, and it's like because my mind was working overdrive trying to think of TikToks. Now it's like, oh, I can do like this pass in the basketball game. Or I'm in the school, like I'm doing homework and I'm writing up a article, and because I'm using like different dialect in my TikToks and being more creative, now I have a different brain towards that as well.
Right. Yeah.
So it's definitely been a really cool eye-opening experience. And then the last piece I want to touch on is just the idea of like everyone has to some degree like a perception, like the perception others have of them, like they hold that very closely. And ever since this TikTok, before this TikTok experience, I really held on to what other people thought of me pretty closely. But because with TikTok, you really put yourself out there, like your stuff's on social media and people can say whatever they want to say and such. It's really been a really good character building experience for me.
Well, dude, it helps that you're 6'7", you're jacked.
But
it's like,
but
fucked.
I've really worked towards the jacked piece too. Like I could have been really skinny.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, yeah, that does really help.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of comments out there too that like are very derogatory and mean as well. But it's like
Probably just jealous ass dudes, huh?
It could be.
Oh, it is probably.
But just knowing, like seeing all that stuff and being able to not internalize it, but like realize that it doesn't like influence me in any way has been really good. Like it's really been good for my
It's a really liberating moment when you get over that like obstacle and that little like mental block of giving shit what people think about.
Totally. Like I'm at a piece now where it's like I don't care what other people think about me, which I think is amazing. And once you get past that, it's like the world like opens up so much more. Like the possibilities kind of seem endless.
You just start being yourself more. Like, okay, this is what I am. This is
like a podcast like this. A year ago, I probably would never want to do. Like I wasn't a big fan of like the way my voice sound. Like I'm very soft spoken, and to be like 6'7" and big like this is like it's very unassuming. But I just got to the point where I was like, nah, this is me, and I'm happy about it.
right.
So,
Yeah.
it's been great.
And it's awesome, man, because like it opens up a lot of opportunities. Because there's like videos that you have like 1 million views, like hundreds of thousands of views, right? Like there's
Yeah,
so
a good
many
amount of them.
there's so many avenues that open from that, and I'm sure they will.
Like just recently, Gymshark saw one of my videos.
Nice.
And they reached out to me and gave me a bunch of apparel, which was a really cool experience. Yeah, I did a photo shoot with them recently. So
Yeah.
just because of TikTok, just because I put myself out there.
Yeah. And you're an absolute specimen. It's fucked. I was like low key creeping you last night with my buddy. I'm like, dude, this guy is an absolute behemoth. Like he's so jacked. Shoulders for days, dude.
I'm telling you, the shoulders. Like I learned this a couple years ago, but if you want to look like you have like a lot of like the Dorito shape, you just work delts.
Yeah.
Like they talk about like the superhero build. If you can just get like the Captain America shoulders, like it builds your like structure so much better.
Right. Yeah. It's easier though for you, man, because you're just blessed beyond belief.
I definitely got some gifts.
It's messed. It's freaking weird. I feel shitty looking at that video. Like when I watch your videos, bro, I'm just like, okay, so I'm not gonna eat for a while because I'm just trying to lose some weight.
Don't tell me that.
No, man, but it's good. And like I think like we touched on this a little bit before, but like I think if you made a video on, you can decide on your own, but if you made a video of just like like some days you aren't feeling it and some days you don't do everything the right way and you don't do your habits, like are there any days where you just don't feel like taking a shower or cold shower, or is it like every day? Because it's just like,
well, that's the big piece about the motivation and discipline interplay. Like there's been previous years where it's like I started to try and do the cold showers, and then I fell off because I was like, today's not the day. But I've gone to a point where when the motivation isn't there, the intrinsic motivation, because that goes like this all the time, like with everyone in life, like motivation comes, it goes, but the discipline is always like that flat line that's always there. And I've gone to a point where the discipline just like has carried out everything.
It overrides the motivation.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of the days, like this past month, like I'm not motivated to have a cold shower. I'm not motivated to go work out at 6 a.m. But the discipline's like, nah, you're doing it. So,
and that's also
that came with that came with habits, came with time. It came with realizing like if I want to reach these specific goals, like I need that discipline to be there. Because I had a breakthrough with basketball this past year, like the previous year, and it was because I instilled all these habits and kept that motivation. Like one thing I did last year that I never did before was I was like, I'm going to the gym 2 times a day outside of practice. So I was working out 3 times a day, like practice, and then I would do an individual session in the morning and an individual session at night. My body was like falling apart. Like I'd had shin splints, my hip was falling apart, I had a lot of things going on. But because every single morning I was like, no, if I want to get to where I want to go, this is what I need to do. Then I was just pushing myself to get there. And it got to the point in like November where my body, because the big thing with athletes that push themselves like that is burnout. Like burnouts, and what's the other one called? It's like relative energy deficiency, where it's like you're just tired all the time because you've pushed your body to the max. I really burnt out in November at the end of the first half of our season. And I was talking to my coach about it for a while. But and then I made a little bit of adjustments in January. But it's just about finding that sweet spot with everything in life.
Right.
Like I'm just trying to find what works and what's the minimal effective dose. So now, like this year, which like has been a game changer for me, is that instead of doing the 3 workouts a day, which burnt me out, I go work out in the morning and I go super hard for 30 minutes, like as hard as I possibly can. Game
only
reps,
30,
only 30 minutes, and then I visualize for 10-15 minutes, and I go through the entire workout I just did in my head. So basically, I just repped out an hour workout, but I only did half the amount of stuff. And because the visualization's just as powerful as actually doing the movement, because when you visualize, like your motor cortex is synapsing the same exact movements that you're actually doing in practice. I literally just did 2 workouts, but my body's not as beat up. So now I do my practice right after that, and then I go back and shoot at night, and then I visualize again. And because I'm only doing half the amount of workouts, my body's not breaking down. But I still feel as confident as I did last year in terms of how much work I put in, because I'm still doing the same amount of mental reps, but my body's not as broken.
Beat up, yeah.
So it's just trial and error. Like last year, had a lot of success, but also had a lot of things that I needed to tweak. And now I'm finally at this point where it's like obviously there's things I still need to maximize, but I'm at a point where I'm like, this is working right now. Let's keep riding with it.
And there's a reason why you look the way you do, and you're athletic as much as you are, and how much you've accomplished throughout your time at UBC, and how much you had to overcome. Like it's just a product of all your habits, and
100%.
Just like breaking it down to a T in a freaking science.
100%. Like I'm super gifted to be like 6'7", but like I couldn't like be like this muscular without all the work that I put in and the diet that I have. Like my diet's like super finely sharpened. Like I eat oatmeal every single morning. I always drink a huge thing of water, and I have like all my supplements and then oatmeal in the morning. And then every 3 hours throughout the day, I have some source of protein. So like it's either 20 to 30 grams of protein every 3 hours. And that's what keeps me full throughout the day. and then just water and carbs on specific days. So I like alternate the carbs based on like what energy sources I need for that particular workout.
Right.
So it's like it's down to a science at this point.
Do you have any cheat days? He just wrote that down. Does he have any cheat days? If so, what does he eat?
I currently I don't have any cheat days, but the way my cheat days works is like if I'm out with my team and it's like everybody else is eating like pizza or something, I'm not gonna be that guy to be like, yo, what? Broccoli. Right?
Yeah.
Because like why would I single myself out like that, right? So it's like I'll eat pizza with the guys, but it's on a very rare occasion. Like I'm never going out of my own way like by myself.
Probably no drinking. Hey.
Not a lot. No. Like there will be the same thing. It's like if I'm with the team, like, and they're all having a drink, like I'll obviously do that for the team environment.
Yeah, but you won't get absolutely puddled.
No, we don't do that. Yeah. No. Because that's one of the worst things you can do as an athlete is get really drunk.
Yeah.
Just the cognitive stuff that goes with it and the performance decline, like it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And there's just so many other things. Like I'm 27, I'm a bit older than you, but it's like your body's in shambles the next few days. Yeah, so it's good, man. It's really good. Dude, this has been great, man. We've hit an hour and a half just now. Yeah.
That's funny.
It's awesome, man.
I was thinking it would be like, I guess it says that on there.
Yeah.
It did like an hour and a half.
Man, appreciate you coming on, man. This has been really good. And your last year at UBC, you've got high expectations, I'm sure, and really I wish you the best. I'm gonna try to come out in a few games.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to plug? Your Instagram, TikTok, Kaizen basketball?
I'm not a big fan of plugging stuff. Like Kaizen basketball's on the come up for sure.
Yeah.
Like we're doing some really good things there, and I'm really happy with the coaching staff that's a part of it.
Episode 61, Brian Wallack. Thanks for coming on, man.
Appreciate
it was good, man. Like, subscribe, comment, whatever you guys need to do. Love the support always, and have a great day. Enjoy your 24. Peace. Dope, man.
That was sweet.
That was good, man.
That went by so fast.
Yeah, dude. It's always like that.